Welcome alle sammen to another episode of Norseman Visits. As usual, we are traveling to the top destinations in the world, but we don't cover the typical tourist attractions. We cover the most ancient and pagan history. And in this episode, we are in Athens, maybe the top place in the world with these kinds of attractions. Some of you are going to know about these, and some of them you're not going to have seen before. There will also be some tips to stay cool in the summer heat, so buckle up with your drinking horns for Norseman Visits Tour of Athens. So first, as always, a couple logistics tips. I recommend that you stay in Monastiraki Square or somewhere nearby. This is within walking distance to most of the important things you're going to want to see. A lot of the hotels and hostels there also have beautiful views of the Acropolis. It's also easily accessible by train to and from the airport. I do not recommend renting a car if you're going to stay in Athens, or anywhere in Greece really, because it's really a hassle to drive and find parking everywhere.
When driving in Greece, the most important thing to remember, lanes and dividers are more like guidelines. Main rule of thumb is basically just drive wherever the hell you want. We will honor that now.
However, if you are planning on driving outside of the city, maybe to Delphi or Olympia, for example, I would recommend a car if you were going to some place like that, but if not, definitely 100% stick to foot or even on scooter for transport. So, the first thing that everyone visits in Athens is the Acropolis. It's absolute hell in the summer heat, especially with a hangover.
Just started.
But it's a must-see and you can't miss it. I recommend just continuing the drinking with some breezers in the morning. They are a lifesaver in the hot Greece.
The lifesaver.
Once you make it up to the top of the hill alive,
We should have came here in the winter.
you will see all of the most important sites of ancient Greece. Just the structures here, some of them go back to more than 3,000 years ago, but there have been archaeological finds showing evidence of settlement here back 6,000 years ago at least. So this is the most ancient of sacred places in Greece and maybe Europe. Not only is there a temple to Athena here, and other spots in the Acropolis where statues and shrines to the gods stood, but there's also a theater and places for political meetings at this location as well. All the most famous leaders and philosophers from ancient Greece would have walked these very steps in order to worship their gods or have some of the most important philosophical discussions known to man. Once you finish at Acropolis, on the way back, you should definitely check out Areopagus, which is a pretty mysterious hill right nearby, bearing the name of the war god Ares, who was supposedly tried here by the other gods for the murder of one of Poseidon's sons. If nothing else, it's a very cool place with a great view and a place to chill out and cool down a little bit.
Oh my god.
Now, at the bottom of the Acropolis hill, you will find two very important agoras. One is the Roman Agora, which we are not as interested in on this channel since we focus on the native pre-Christian history, but more importantly, the ancient Greek native Agora. This was basically a town center going back to the oldest times, so a place for assembly, but also a deeply spiritual site that I found some very interesting things here relating to the Norse religion as well. These things, boulders here with holes in them, are what is known in Scandinavia as a Arvakvarn, where sacrifices to the elves would have been left out in those holes. We also have a pit here where offerings would be made to the dead ancestors, similar to the underworld and these places in the Norse beliefs. You will also find full temples in the ancient Agora, like the one to the god Hephaestos, which is the god of metalworkers and blacksmithing, which is one of the best preserved temples that we have actually. And in contrast, right next to it, the temple of Ares, the god of war, which is completely leveled to the ground.
And this was for very good reason, and this happened in the Norse world as well. The temples of somewhat neutral pagan deities was tolerated at the earlier times in history, such as something like the fertility gods or agricultural gods and things like that. Just like this temple, the blacksmith metalworkers temple would have been allowed, but the god of war temple would have been an absolute no-no. The god of war is not something that the Christians wanted the pagans worshipping or invoking at all, because that would give them a hell of a lot harder time to conquer.
So before we leave the Agora, just a couple of fun facts about the Greek religion.
Also, in ancient Greek times, it was illegal to bring sticks or wood outside of a sacred place. Get him!
There are many more temples in Athens, but one you absolutely can't miss is the Temple of Zeus. So interestingly enough, this is actually the oldest one in the area, one of the oldest temples in all of ancient Greece, but it remained under construction and unbuilt for hundreds of years and basically interrupted, and in the meantime, that's when the temples to Athena were built all over Athens. So possibly, for whatever reason it may be, the Greeks in this area originally mainly may have venerated Zeus in its oldest times, but eventually they switched over to Athena being their main patron goddess, and that's why Athens is called Athens, or Athena in Greek. And maybe in the oldest times it would have been called something related to Zeus, but we don't know. It's just quite mysterious there. Perhaps it's time we bring back a little Zeus, because the hellish heat here in the summer, a little rain from the storm god would have been nice. Final thing in Athens you can't miss is the Panathenaic Stadium. A more than 2,000-year-old stadium, and games were played even before that time back then, where all the most famous athletes of the time would have walked in these exact steps. They would have come out of these exact entrances, and they would have competed exactly where we can run and frolic today. Only back then it would have been with a little less clothes, as was tradition in ancient Greece. Finally, I'm not a big fan of museums. I prefer to go to sites of battles and sacred places from ancient times that the humans actually used, but the Archaeological Museum of Athens is something you just can't miss. My favorite time period is actually the Bronze Age, and there is no place in the world that has more history from that time period than right here in this museum. And of course, it has all the statues to the gods and the spiritual items that you can expect from ancient Greece. I'll do another video just on this museum by itself, but for now, that's all for this video. Hope you enjoyed this world-famous travel location. This is only a fraction of what Athens has to offer, but the ones I showed you are at least the top 5 most important things to visit if you are interested in the most ancient pre-Christian history. But let me know, did I miss anything? Have you guys been to Athens? Any other places that are worth mentioning? Any places you recommend? Let us all know down below in the comments, but that's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.